I'm going to walk you through our entire pre-production process for a commercial shoot, start to finish. Not the version you'd get on a union set with a full crew and 3 weeks of prep, but the kind that a lot of us are actually doing. The version that works when you have a 3 to 4 person crew, a couple of cast members, and 1 or 2 days to get it all on camera. So we're going to go through the inquiry, then moving into creative concept, casting, locations, props, wardrobe, and scheduling, getting the call sheet together and getting to set, and finally the programs and tools that we actually use to manage the whole process. This is also the exact process behind a real project we just did, a mini brand documentary we shot for an e-bike company called Urtopia for their Atom model launch. So I'm going to use that shoot as the running example the whole way through, because despite a few normal logistical complications of the nature of just what we were shooting, this was probably up there as one of the smoothest productions that we've done this year, and where I feel like I was actually able to really see our process working like a well-oiled machine. So I'll be pulling up photos from the actual locations, the concept, the cast as we go, just so you can kind of see how each phase actually played out, not just how it's supposed to work in theory. Phase 1, the inquiry. So every project starts the same way. A new client comes to us wanting to do something, and before we talk numbers or timelines, we send them an inquiry form. And it's not a really short form either. It asks about their brand, the product they want featured, the top 3 to 5 benefits they want highlighted, any safety or messaging requirements, whether the product is even finalized yet. It asked about audience and emotion, who this is actually for, and what they want a viewer to feel watching it. It asked about the creative goals, where the content's going to live, what talent feels authentic to their brand, what deliverables they're picturing, their timeline, and if they're willing to share it, the budget. The reason we front load all of this instead of just jumping on a call right away is simple. It gives us the full picture really fast, and it gives us 3 things that actually determine whether this project is a good fit for us as a company: scope, budget, and timeline. That is the iron triangle. I talked about this in a later video if you want to go watch it. If those 3 don't line up, no amount of creative enthusiasm is going to save the project later. Budget is always the tricky one. A lot of clients aren't ready to give you a number, and honestly, that's not usually them being difficult. It's just a sign that they're still probably early in their planning process and maybe still getting internal buy-in. Maybe they're comparing production companies. So instead of pushing hard for an exact figure, we'll often just quote a ballpark on the higher end, and if it's too much, we negotiate down from there. If the scope feels like a strong fit, we'll send a 3-tier proposal instead: good, better, and best. Simple is the key word here, and I do mean that. I have made the mistake of building out this beautifully fully designed proposal, deck, mood boards, the whole thing for a client who turned out to just be shopping around, and they ended up going a completely different direction. So that was hours that I never got back. It's important to read where the client is actually at in their process before you invest real time into something pretty. A simple one-pager can get you the same answer. And if they do know their number, quote to that number. Don't just show someone with a $10,000 budget a $15,000 quote and expect them to feel good about it. You're not proving your value, you're just creating friction before the relationship even starts. Once the fit looks right, budget, scope, and timeline are all lining up, one of 2 things happens. If the inquiry form was thorough, we'll jump straight to the quote. More often than not though, it's not fully filled out, so we'll often schedule a discovery call just to close any of the gaps. Either way, from there we send a quote, a scope of work, and a timeline, and if the client says yes, the next step is a contract and an invoice. We typically structure that as a 50% upfront, 50% on delivery of the first draft of the assets. That's the business end. All right, now let's get into the actual real pre-production. Phase 2, creative concept, casting, and locations. This is where the Urtopia Atom project actually started to take shape. So let me give you a full picture of what we were building for them, because it's a good illustration of how fast things can get complicated when you're dealing with multiple locations, cast, and scenes, and at the same time on a small crew budget. So Urtopia is a carbon fiber e-bike company. They're an awesome client and we love working with them. For this one, they wanted a mini brand doc style film, a daughter surprising her father who'd been slowing down because of knee issues and quietly drifting from the active life that they used to share together. What starts out as a simple ride around the neighborhood grows into a journey through bike paths and light trails, eventually landing back at a trail that meant something to them in the past, reconnecting them through movement and memory, candid observational moments, a few subtle interview reflections, a natural voiceover woven throughout, and the whole point was to show the ease and the comfort and the capability as the ride builds from these quiet neighborhood streets to more adventurous terrain and a shared summit at the end. That's the kind of brief that does sound simple on paper, but actually ends up being a lot to coordinate. Real emotion arc, real locations, real physical activity on a run and gun schedule. The one thing I wanted to say clearly before I break this phase down, what I'm about to describe isn't the traditional union way of running pre-production. There's There's no tech scout, there's no table read, there's no camera test days. And that's not because those steps aren't valuable. It's because with a small commercial production, the kind that most of us are actually doing, has neither the budget nor the real necessity for them. Scope and budget need to be executed in proportion to what they actually are, and trying to run something that's like maybe a $15,000 shoot like it's a $150,000 shoot just means you run out of time and money before you run out of steps. So 3 things kick off at the same time. I start developing the script and the overall creative concept, and our production manager starts casting and location scouting, and we reach out to any additional crew we may need to bring on. For casting, we're not starting from zero every single time, which honestly is one of the biggest time savers in the whole entire process. Over the years of working in this, we've built an actual directory of actors that we work with and trust for the kind of work that we do. People we know that are going to show up on time, they take direction really well, and they read as authentic on camera rather than acting. We go and pull selects from that directory first, and if nothing fits the brief, we go wider, and we'll put maybe a casting call out on a platform like Backstage, or we work our own network to find someone new. For the Urtopia project in particular, our cast was Ron and Martina. They were playing father and daughter, and we'd worked with both of them before on other projects, so we already knew they were going to be a good fit. And just as important for this one, they could also both actually handle biking comfortably. That matters a lot more than people think. You need a talent who can be relaxed and natural on a bike while also hitting emotional beats, and not someone who's just gripping the handlebars, white-knuckled, trying not to fall over, because I have had that happen, and it's a mess. Authenticity was the entire point of this project, so comfort in activity itself was not optional. And one thing that we send out alongside casting every single time, no exceptions, is an image release form. Talent signs off giving us permission to actually use their image in the commercial. And it sounds like a formality, but I have had it matter in a very real way. On a larger project a couple of years ago, the client actually came back later asking us to confirm the talent was cleared to be used on a massive billboard that they were actually putting up in an airport. If we hadn't already had that release signed and on file, that would have turned into a really big scramble, or worse, a deal breaker. So it's important you just get it signed at the same time you lock the casting and not afterwards. All right, let's jump into locations. So locations work the same way. Years of shooting outdoor product work means we've built out a location directory around where we live. Things like properties, trailheads, parks, backyards, whatever fits the kind of lifestyle content we tend to shoot. And we pull from it, we grab reference photos we've either shot ourselves or sourced or from previous productions, and we send them over. For Urtopia, we landed on a couple quiet neighborhoods that gave us some really quick, easy riding shots and some local bike paths, plus a local park with great foliage, solid trails, and genuinely a good lookout point for the summit moment at the end of the story. Our PM usually packages all of this together into a client-facing brief, and we send it out through Honeybook. And the client goes through it, they pick what they want or tells us if they want anything changed. And this step does matter more than it sounds like it should, because getting client buy-in on cast and location early prevents a much more painful conversation later, like a reshoot request after you've already wrapped. Once cast and locations are locked and the script and creative concept are approved on the client side, we move on. On the script itself, I usually keep this intentionally simple unless a client is specifically paying for a full storyboard, which is pretty rare at this budget level. Most of the time, it's a spreadsheet, shots listed out in order, with length and any voiceover notes, graphics callouts, and sometimes a reference image or clip just sitting right next to the shot for visual context. It's not fancy, but it's clear enough that anyone on the team can open it and understand exactly what we're building. For a lot of our repeat clients, we'll often usually skip an entire whole spreadsheet, and we just use our creative concept template instead, which shows a storyline, a handful of visuals, maybe a voiceover, and an overall sense of the feel that we're going for. And when you've already built trust with a client over multiple projects, you don't really need to over-document every beat. They kind of know what to expect when they're working with you already. Phase 3, props, wardrobe, and scheduling. Once the script, cast, and locations are all approved, we move into props and any remaining wardrobe needs. Unless there's a specific creative requirement or specific budget actually allocated for the wardrobe, we usually work with whatever talent already has available, and we send over a few options to the client if they care to weigh in, and move forward from there. Not every decision on a small production needs to be a production. It's important to save your energy for the things that actually move the needle on the screen. On Urtopia, the props were pretty minimal: a Jeep, a bike rack, and helmets. That's basically it. Wardrobe wasn't really heavily specified either, and we just made sure Ron and Martina showed up in good outfits that read as sporty but comfortable and good on camera. Nothing overly styled, because the entire purpose of this project was authenticity. For this particular project, the second something looks too produced, you start to lose the documentary feel of it and the whole concept it was built around. Then comes the part that more than anything else on this list actually determines whether your shoot happens on time and on budget. Scheduling. You're trying to line up cast availability, crew availability, weather, your overall project timeline, all at the same time. And if any one of those slips too far, you end up editing through the night just to hit a delivery date. And so that's why we check talent availability as early as we can, while we're still sending over casting options to the client. A last-minute availability change from talent can throw an entire production off of its rails, so the earlier you lock that down, the fewer surprises you're dealing with a week out from the shoot. Urtopia is actually a really good example of why this matters. We actually had roughly 2 months from the initial inquiry to final delivery, something like that, which sounds like plenty of runway, but here's the complication. One of our cast members was leaving the country the day after we wrapped, and we didn't actually find that out until a little bit later in the production. So that meant there was zero room for error. We didn't have time for a reshoot day, no pushing the date, because the alternative was recasting entirely, which we did not want to do this close to the client's product launch deadline. We genuinely had one shot to get it right, and the only thing that gave us any breathing room at all was that our other cast member had wide open availability. So we could just build the schedule around the one hard constraint instead of two. That's the kind of thing that never shows up on a shot list, but it's exactly the kind of thing that can quietly sink a production if you don't catch it early. And once we land on a date everyone can actually commit to, cast, crew, and client, if they're on set, which honestly for us is pretty rare since a lot of our work is remote based for international brands, we build the production schedule. This is also where I build the shot list, and this is one of the few places I will end up using AI. All right, so I am not an AI evangelist by any stretch. There is a lot of slop out there that I just cannot stand. I do have my own opinion on it, as I'm sure a lot of you do too, but taking a shot list and dropping it into a tool like ChatGPT along with a description of what's happening on the day and asking it to build out a mock-up schedule based on location moves, time per scene, and talent availability just saves real tangible time on a task that is otherwise tedious. I'll be fully honest though, I almost never end up using the schedule. It hands back as is. It's a starting point and not usually a finished product. It rarely nails what's actually realistic for each individual scene, so I'll usually have to go through it afterwards myself and fine tune the timing, the company moves, lunch breaks, buffer time for if something goes sideways, all that kind of stuff. And normally building this schedule would be a first or second AD's job on a larger set, but as you can tell, on the size of the projects we typically run, that's usually just me wearing yet another hat. If you're a small production company or a solo shooter scaling up, get comfortable wearing a lot of hats. It's just part of the deal until the budgets grow into dedicated roles. And sometimes you don't even need it. Sometimes it's actually better to just keep the crew really small. Keeps it flexible with the type of work that you're doing. Phase 4, the call sheet and getting to set. Once the schedule is locked, the shot list finalized, cast is confirmed, crew is ready, and the client's happy to move forward, I send everything over to our PM who puts together the call sheet email. This is really the last checkpoint before the whole thing goes live. If you're not familiar, a call sheet is the single document that will hold everything anyone on set needs to know. Call times, location, addresses, parking instructions, the weather forecast, a brief overview of what's being shot, when lunch is happening, the nearest hospital in case of an emergency, and things like contact info for every key point of contact. It's what lets someone show up to set at 6 a.m. already knowing exactly what the day looks like without having to ask a bunch of questions. A good call sheet will do more for your production's efficiency than almost any other single document. We'll usually include a lunch order form in that same email too, and it sounds like a small thing, but it does save you from burning production time an hour before lunch, where you're walking around set with a menu trying to collect everyone's order while the clock is ticking. Get it done ahead of time, hand it to a PA, they call it in, shows up, and it's one less thing to manage on the day. So once that email goes out, we are ready to shoot. So the programs we actually use. Before I wrap this up, I want to talk about something a little bit different, which is the actual software stack behind all of this, because I do get asked about it sometimes. And honestly, it's an area where I don't think anyone has really solved the problem yet, especially with how production has really changed over the years. Here's what we're working with right now. HoneyBook is our main project management platform. That's where our cast options, location options, project details, prop approvals, and all of that client-facing decision-making gets sent. It routes over to our email, which is also our main line of client communication, and that's where we keep every ongoing project and all of its details. Contracts, invoicing, and some of our payments also run through HoneyBook unless a client specifically needs QuickBooks, which we'll use sometimes. For anything creative like templates, scripts, that kind of thing, I'm often bouncing between Canva and Google Docs and exporting it to a PDF. Our casting directory usually lives in a Trello board, and for internal communication between myself, our production manager, and crew, that's usually all on Slack. And so that's like 5 or 6 different tools stitched together to run one project. And this is the thing I just keep coming back to. I have not found a single program built for production companies like ours. Companies running multiple commercial shoots, social content, social media management, all at the same time that need contracts, invoicing, payments, external client communication, internal crew communication, and a place to send approval options for cast, locations, props, creative scripts, all in one system. Maybe it's allowing for revisions like Frame.io, I don't know. Studio Binder is probably the closest thing I've found to this, but as far as I can tell, it's really built for more like one-off narrative productions, which is what I've usually used it for. Features, shorts, that kind of thing, and not so much for a company that's running a rolling slate of commercial and social projects at once. So I'm sure there's probably something out there close to this. Genuinely, if you know about it, please drop it in the comments. And if you're a developer watching this thinking, you know what, I could build that, I promise you there is a real market of small production companies who would probably use it tomorrow. Or maybe I'll develop it. I don't know. One last thing before I wrap it up, and it's a small one, but it has saved me more headaches than almost anything else on this list. When you're on set, have printed documents. If you're working outdoors, the last thing you want is to be pulling up a schedule on your phone every 5 minutes. You're waiting for it to load. Maybe there's no signal out in the middle of nowhere. You're unlocking your phone for the 10th time that hour. And a printed schedule and a shot list that you can mark up with a pen as you go is just faster. There's no buffering, no bad Wi-Fi, no friction. You just grab it, check it off, cross it, move on to the next shot. It's old-fashioned, but it works great. That's pretty much it. That's our entire pre-production process, from the first inquiry form to standing on set with a printed shot list in hand. It's not very fancy, and it's honestly not something that's meant to be. It's built to move really fast, stay flexible when real life doesn't cooperate, and get a small crew through a commercial shoot without losing the plot along the way. And I want to say that something that took me probably too long to actually accept: this process is not a machine. It's not a code that can just run the same way every single time. As you all know, with filmmaking, you're wrangling real people, real locations, real weather, physical props that ship late, clients who take 3 extra days to approve something, and sometimes props get ordered before casting even starts. Sometimes locations are the last thing that gets locked. And that's not a failure of the process. That's just what happens when you are organizing real life instead of a spreadsheet. So this is our process. We stick to it as closely as we can. And when we can't, we try to build in enough flexibility so that it doesn't fall apart. So if you run a small production company, or you're trying to figure out how to structure your own process without a 40-person crew backing you up, I hope this gave you something that you can actually use. Not just a theory, but an actual workflow from a real project. If it did, do me a favor and hit subscribe. I am trying to put videos out like this regularly, breaking down the business side of filmmaking and also exactly how we run projects on the production side, not just the creative side. And if there's a specific part of this process you do want me to go deeper on, like casting or scheduling or client communication, whatever it is, please drop it in the comments. I do read all of them, and it genuinely does shape what I make next. So thanks for watching, guys. Appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one.